Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're tackling pronunciation. It's something so many language learners think about,
Mm.
and I think it can be intimidating.
Yeah.
But we've got a great episode of the Speakeasy podcast to help us unpack this. They had on a linguistics coach.
Oh, nice.
They get into some really fascinating stuff, like why pronunciation matters even more than we think, and the surprising power of listening.
Oh, interesting.
And even some techniques you might not know, even if you've been at this language learning thing for a while.
Cool.
So to kick us off, they use this analogy of pronunciation being a bridge between knowing a language and actually being understood.
That's interesting. What do you think about that?
I really like that because it captures that feeling of being stuck when you can't quite get your point across.
Yeah.
Even if you have the vocabulary, the grammar down,
Yeah.
it's like you're standing there ready to go, but something's holding you back.
Exactly. And they actually highlight that even with just basic language skills, if you have solid pronunciation, it can make a huge difference.
Really?
Yeah. They even cited research that people are more likely to think someone is fluent
Oh, wow.
if their pronunciation is clear, even if their grammar isn't perfect.
See, now that is encouraging for anyone who is maybe just beginning their language learning journey.
Yeah.
It means you don't have to be perfect to start making a good impression.
Right.
But I know what some listeners might be thinking. What about sounding like a native speaker? Isn't that the ultimate goal?
Yeah, that's a common question.
Did the Speakeasy podcast address that?
Yeah, the expert guest actually pushes back on that idea.
Okay.
They acknowledge that achieving perfect native-like pronunciation can be very difficult. And they say it might not even be necessary for everyone.
Interesting.
So instead of focusing on just pure mimicry, they suggest focusing on confident and clear communication.
Okay, so not erasing your own unique voice, but refining it.
Exactly.
Making sure pronunciation doesn't hold you back from expressing yourself.
Right. And connecting with others.
Exactly. And they said trying too hard to sound native can actually create all this pressure
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah.
anxiety.
For sure.
And that can actually hurt your progress.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I know I've felt that pressure before,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes you not want to speak up.
Yeah.
But if we think about clarity and confidence,
Mm-hmm.
it feels a lot more freeing.
Absolutely. And that leads right into one of the most fundamental parts of pronunciation,
Okay.
which is often overlooked.
What's that?
Listening.
Ah, listening. Okay, so how does the Speakeasy podcast talk about listening?
They describe it as immersing yourself in the music of the language.
I like that.
So when you listen to native speakers,
Yeah.
you absorb their rhythm, their intonation, the natural flow of the language.
So it's not just understanding the words,
Right.
but like the melody almost.
Exactly. They emphasize that good pronunciation isn't just about the individual sounds.
Mhm.
It's about understanding how those sounds interact in a phrase or a sentence. But I'm thinking, if we just passively listen to music or podcasts,
Yeah.
it's enjoyable, but
Yeah.
will it really help my pronunciation?
That's a good point. It takes more than just passive listening. The Speakeasy podcast suggests trying something called shadowing.
I've heard of that, but I'm not really sure what it is. Could you explain?
Of course. Basically, you try to become a vocal twin of a native speaker.
Oh, wow.
You pick a short audio clip,
Mm-hmm.
listen to one sentence, pause it, and then repeat it, trying to copy their pronunciation, intonation, and rhythm.
It sounds challenging, but I bet it's fun.
Yeah.
You're not just listening, you're really actively engaging.
Exactly.
What other techniques did they suggest?
Another one was recording yourself speaking.
Ooh, that's scary.
I know. It can be tough to hear your own voice,
Yeah,
but it's super helpful for finding areas to improve.
I can see that.
They recommend comparing your recording to a native speaker, paying close attention to the differences
That's a good idea.
in pronunciation, intonation, even how you form sounds with your mouth.
Yeah.
The guest also said to pay attention to sounds that are tough for learners of your target language.
So for English learners, it might be the puff sounds
Yeah.
or those nasal vowels in French.
Exactly. And they said to practice those tough sounds until they feel more natural.
Okay, so now I have a question that I often hear from language learners.
Mm-hmm.
Should they try to copy a specific accent?
Like American English versus British English.
Yeah, exactly.
Do they have advice on that?
Yeah, they said that choosing a specific accent can be good, depending on where you'll be using the language.
Makes sense.
But no matter what, clarity is the most important thing.
So as long as you're understood,
Mm-hmm.
your accent is secondary.
So it's about making sure your accent doesn't get in the way of communication.
Right. And they even said that accents add richness and diversity to languages,
I love that.
as long as they don't make it hard to understand each other.
Ah.
So they encourage learners to embrace their own accents while still working on pronunciation.
I think that's great because language is about expressing yourself
Yeah.
and connecting with people.
For sure.
So before we move on, what are your thoughts on what we've talked about so far?
Well, one thing that really stands out to me is that shift from trying to perfectly mimic to focusing on communication.
Yeah,
I think that takes the pressure off.
absolutely.
Lets you be yourself more.
I agree. And I love that they talked about listening as the foundation of good pronunciation.
It reminds us that we have to train our ears just as much as our tongues.
For sure. So for everyone listening, think about the languages that you admire. What is it about their pronunciation that you love?
That's a good question.
And could you use those same elements to make your own speech even better?
Yeah.
We'll dive into even more techniques and strategies in the next part.
Cool.
So stay tuned.
Welcome back to our pronunciation deep dive. Last time we were talking about the importance of listening and how pronunciation is really about clear communication. Now I want to dig into some more advanced techniques
Okay, it's
to
good.
really refine your pronunciation.
I'm ready.
So the Speakeasy podcast talks about how important it is
Yeah.
to understand the nuances of sounds,
Okay.
and not just how to say them on their own,
Uh-huh.
but how the sound changes based on where it is in a word
Oh, interesting.
or what sounds are around it.
So kind of like how a musical note sounds different depending on the other notes.
Exactly. It's all about context.
I see.
Like they gave an example of
Yeah.
how a vowel can sound different depending on
Uh-huh.
whether it comes before a hard consonant or a soft consonant.
Hadn't thought about that before.
It's really fascinating.
So how can we become more aware of those subtle shifts?
They said to really pay attention to those details when you're listening to native speakers.
Okay, so be a more active listener,
Exactly.
trying to pick up on those variations.
Yeah, like a pronunciation detective.
I like that.
And then to really build those detective skills, they introduced something called minimal pairs.
Okay, I've heard of those.
Have you used them before?
I've heard the term, but I'm not really sure how they work.
Okay, so minimal pairs are words that are only different by one sound,
Got it.
like ship and sheep,
Okay.
or rice and lice.
Okay.
And by focusing on these pairs,
Yeah.
you train your ear to hear those tiny differences.
It's like a workout for your ears.
Exactly. The Speakeasy podcast said to make flashcards with minimal pairs
Okay.
and practice them, listening closely to how they sound,
Makes sense.
and then try to use them in sentences.
That's a good way to make it more real.
Right. And that kind of leads us to another tool they talked about, phonetics.
Okay, phonetics. I have to admit,
Yeah.
I get a little intimidated by phonetics.
Oh, yeah,
Those symbols.
it can seem complicated.
Yeah. So do you think it's something that average language learners need to worry about?
Well, they made a good point on the podcast. You don't have to be a linguistics expert to get something out of learning a little bit about phonetics.
Okay, so how can learning about those symbols and transcriptions actually help us?
So phonetic symbols represent the sounds of speech,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not tied to the spelling of words in any specific language,
Okay.
like a universal language for sound.
So instead of relying on the spelling, which can be unreliable,
Totally.
we can look at the phonetic transcription to see exactly how it should sound.
Right, and lots of dictionaries have phonetic transcriptions.
It's good to know.
And there are tons of resources online. The most common system is the IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet.
Right.
Even learning a few key symbols can be really helpful.
Okay, so that's minimal pairs and phonetics.
Mm-hmm.
How can we actually use these in our everyday language practice?
They stressed making pronunciation practice part of your routine,
Okay.
not just a separate activity.
So not just like 1 hour a week.
Right. Integrate it into everything you do.
So like when I'm reading, pay attention to how words are pronounced.
Exactly. And look up the phonetic transcription if you need to.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're listening, try to copy the intonation and rhythm.
So it all works together.
It's a holistic approach.
I like that.
And they actually bring up something that often gets missed.
Oh, what's that?
The physicality of pronunciation.
Now that sounds interesting. What do they mean by that?
So pronunciation isn't just about your vocal cords.
Right.
Your tongue, lips, teeth, jaw, even your breathing.
Wow.
It all plays a part in shaping the sounds.
So it's a full-body workout for our mouths.
Exactly. They said to pay attention to how native speakers move their mouths and try to copy them, even if it feels weird at first.
Like doing exercises for your mouth muscles.
I love that. And just like exercise, consistency is key.
Practice makes perfect.
Or at least progress.
This has been so insightful.
Glad to hear it.
I feel like we've really gone beyond the basics here.
Yeah, we've leveled up.
But I know there's still more. So what can we look forward to in the last part of our deep dive?
Well, in the final part, we're going to talk about some specific resources and strategies to help you keep working on your pronunciation on your own.
Sounds good.
We'll cover online tools, language exchange, and even how to stay motivated.
Okay, cool.
And find the fun in it.
Can't wait. For now, everyone listening, think about what we've talked about in this part.
Yeah.
What has stood out to you?
That's a good question.
And what challenges are you facing with pronunciation?
Yeah.
Keep those in mind as we go into the final part of our deep dive. Welcome back. We're on the final part of our pronunciation deep dive.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. But we're not done yet.
Right. We still need to equip you with some resources.
Exactly. All the tools you need.
Yeah, to keep improving your pronunciation.
So let's open up that pronunciation toolkit.
I like that.
And the Speakeasy podcast mentioned that there are so many online resources now.
Oh, yeah. Tons.
So what do they recommend specifically?
Well, they talked about websites, apps, YouTube channels,
Wow.
even entire courses online.
It's amazing how much is out there.
It really is. Some of them focus on interactive exercises. Others have really in-depth pronunciation guides for different languages.
So it's like having a personal coach in your pocket.
Exactly. But the key is to find what works best for you.
Right. Because everyone learns differently.
Exactly. Some people like visual learning. Others prefer games.
Yeah, like it's choosing the right hiking boots.
I like that analogy.
You wouldn't wear flip-flops to climb a mountain.
Definitely not. But they also talked about the importance of real-life interaction, too.
Right, getting out there and actually using the language.
Exactly. They suggested finding language partners, joining conversation groups, or just talking to native speakers whenever you can.
Those are all good ideas.
Yeah, those real-world experiences are so valuable.
It's like taking your pronunciation skills out for a test drive.
Right. And even if you make mistakes.
Which everyone does.
Of course. It helps you learn and adapt.
They actually shared a funny story on the podcast.
Oh, yeah?
About the guest mispronounced a word while ordering food.
Oh, no.
It was a little awkward.
Yeah.
But it made for a funny story.
At least they learned the right way to say it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those real-life moments can be the best teachers.
They really can. The Speakeasy podcast also emphasized something else.
Okay, what's that?
Staying motivated and having fun with it.
Yeah, because pronunciation takes time and effort.
It does. It's easy to get discouraged.
I've been there.
Yeah, we all have. But it's important to celebrate the small wins.
Like when you finally nail a difficult sound.
Exactly. And they said to try to make the practice enjoyable.
Okay, how do we do that?
Well, maybe you could use tongue twisters.
Oh, those are fun.
Or sing along to songs in your target language.
That's a good one.
Or even play around with different accents.
That reminds me of when I was learning Italian.
Oh, yeah. What happened?
I got really into copying the way Italians use their hands when they talk.
Oh, that's great.
It started as pronunciation practice.
Uh-huh.
But it became this fun part of my speaking style.
I love that. It's all about finding what makes it enjoyable for you.
Exactly. So as we wrap up, I want to say that pronunciation isn't just about being perfect.
It's about so much more.
It's about expressing yourself, connecting with others.
And experiencing the world in new ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it might be challenging at times.
It definitely can be.
But every step you take brings you closer to your goals.
Keep listening. Keep practicing.
And most importantly,
yeah,
keep having fun with it.
Thanks for joining us for this pronunciation deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.